far is too far when it comes to game shows is what I'm trying to figure out. This question's kind of been haunting me ever since I did the True for Consequences induction for the Game Show Garbage YouTube channel. And I kind of have to go back in time to figure that stuff out. I talked about the 1950s on Strike It Rich. People were traveling to New York, losing all of their money, and hoping, because of their dire situation, they could get on the show and pay for a flight home. More often than not, they wouldn't make it on the show, whether it be on the television show or on the radio version. So a lot of aid agencies were having to come in and help get them home, and drove quite a few of them to bankruptcy. So that is an example of things going too far during that point in time. Now, because of the quiz show scandals, there couldn't be much to do in the 60s. The only major thing that I remember happening about the 60s was some big money game shows not doing too well, like $100 grand for ABC, but nothing of that exists. But then Chuck Barris came around in 1966, 1967 with the Newlywed Game and the Dating Game. And he was an expert at knowing when to toe the line. He never really, during that time period, as far as my recollection, jumped over the line. How I Met Your Mother... I'm sorry, not How I Met Your Mother. That's a pretty terrible sitcom from the 2000s and 2010s. I'm thinking about How's Your Mother-in-Law? Couples fine, but dealing with mother-in-law jokes, I think they were kind of out of date in 67. So that's another example of towing the line. And Chuck Barris kept on towing the line and almost crossing it a few times during his tenure. We know about some of the stories about the new treasure hunt with Jeff Edwards, where one of the stories was a contestant was going to win a new car, but the twist is they would only have won the windshield. And Jeff Edwards almost quit on the spot. But they were able to talk things through, and Jeff Edwards stayed on, and that clunk never made it past the idea stage. Chuck Barris would then proceed to actually jump over the line a couple of times. There were a couple of incidents on The Gong Show, like you remember the Popsicle Twins. That's an example of going over the line, especially imitating, going down on someone, I believe is the correct term, to be able to keep my monetization. Then you have him completely crossing the line with Three's a Crowd. It gets to the point of grossness that I'm going to talk about in the Bedroom Buddies induction. We, as Americans at that time, didn't want to know what was going on between the husband and a secretary, or let alone a husband and a wife in the biblical sense. And that's the show that pretty much got Chuck Barris thrown off of TV entirely in 1980. There were a couple of moments on The Gong Show which could have crossed the line, but honestly, they were handled quite well. I remember this story being told to me by Adam Nedeff, who is writing a book about The Gong Show. It is, I do believe, the first instance where trans people were contestants on the show. And it's kind of interesting how you'd think a nighttime version would be more bawdier than the daytime version, but that's not the case. In the nighttime version, when a trans contestant had an act, Chuck acted confused, and said, here was a man, and now she's a woman, and he admits to getting confused with all these things, but I think he handled it okay. There is one episode, I believe it's not Anita Bryant Day episode of The Gong Show. We had a trans woman performing a striptease. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. And it turns out that the striptease trans artist won the day. And so she got the 5/16/32. And to that I say, congratulations. You're an inspiration to us all, I think. Anyway. going to the 80s, I'm trying to think how shows went too far in the 80s. There was defrauding people in the 80s. Like, there was this call-in show called TeleQuest, and which they promised this big jackpot playoff of $100,000 or so, and it never materialized. As a matter of fact, I don't think it lasted more than 13 weeks. And I heard that the producer of that show ran away with a bunch of money. But I don't have a full episode of that to take a look at it and say, is this format crap or not, to say that it belongs in game show garbage. So that's why I've held off on doing that one for a long time. There's just no footage. Well, there's some footage, but it's only like a 10-minute clip, but not a full episode. Then the 90s hit, and things were starting to push the envelope, especially with relationship shows. People think Studs was bawdy and lewd, but he was pretty controlled. And plus, it was a lot of young people, raging hormones, and all that fun stuff. So, it's chaos, but it's more controlled chaos. Bedroom Buddies, I'll talk more about in the induction, so we'll skip that. Then you got some pretty outrageous shows in the 90s that I think mentally pushed contestants too far. There was Trashed in 1994 for MTV, where they would destroy property right in front of the contestants' eyes. Their own property right in front of their eyes. And there were some moments where it just got really depressing. And it's like, I don't want to watch this anymore. You might see that in a future induction down the road. Then we get to the modern day game shows. And the more crossing the line we've seen, I think, is on the reality game shows like Survivor or Big Brother. Like over the past couple of seasons of Survivor, we've seen Jeff Varner out someone as trans. He outed Zeke Smith as being a trans man, and that was not kosher at all. He basically used that as a last Hail Mary just to try to save himself, because he has never made it to the jury, and yet he got chance after chance after chance. And from a gameplay perspective, I kind of get it, but from a human's perspective, that's just way too far, and he got pilloried for it. So I don't blame him one bit. I don't blame the people one bit pillorying Varner for it. Varner can go screw himself for all I care. Even though he says he's now a better person because of that pillorying, And then we get to one of the more recent seasons of Survivor, where we saw Dan, trying to remember what season this was. Was it? No, it's not David versus Goliath. This was season 39, the one before Winners at War. And Dan was sexually harassing tribe-mates and also producers. Like, Dan would talk really lewd about them, or rub them the wrong way, or essentially caress one of the staffers, and that pretty much got him kicked off the show. So, yeah. And then the biggest cesspool of crossing the line has to go to Big Brother. I mean, it's almost every season where you could have like a bingo board. Like, who's going to say something racist? Who's going to say something homophobic? Who's going to say something extremely stupid? Who's going to do something homophobic? Who's going to do something that, by all accounts, should get them kicked off the show? And everything. But they don't get kicked off. And you get to emotional distress, which I think is really too far. And we saw that with the Truth or Consequences pilot, especially that final stunt, aka the ultimate consequence. And it's just hard to watch. You know, essentially as close to a domestic violence situation as you can get without it actually being domestic violence. But thankfully we seem to be getting past all of that. And that's pretty much all I got for this one. Leave a comment about something in game shows that you think is going too far. And I'm not talking about stupid gimmicks. Now, I want to remind everybody here about when you leave a comment, I'm not talking about stupid gimmicks on a game show going too far, like Deal or No Deal's $1 Million Moment, stuff like that. No. I'm talking about something that's morally reprehensible and something absolutely disgusting when it comes to game shows. This is something I might have to do a follow-up on a year or so down the road. But until then, this is Cindy Sadler for Game Show Garbage. Like, comment, subscribe, patreon.com/GameShowGumbo if you want videos. Until next time.